Welcome. It's Monday. It's the day for Journeys Webcast. And I've got my security hat on. Some of you who know me know that sometimes I answer my phone to an unknown number as security. So a good friend of mine sent me this hat in the middle of COVID because he found it at some sort of swap meet. And I love it. That's my security guy. So security is also what's happening in COVID times. You know, all the talk of the new variants. I should put my mask on because I hear these new variants are going to be able to go through glass, wood, you know, they'll jump up off the ground and grab you by the leg. Anyway, scary stuff, truly. So security. My name is Allan Karl. This is the Journeys Webcast, and thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate you spending time with me every Monday. I'm humbled by how many people see this. And for those of you who are watching this on the YouTube replay, because this is up on YouTube after the event, thank you too for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And for those of you who haven't yet subscribed to that YouTube channel, I would like you guys to go do that for sure. I'm going to just put that up in the sidebar. So a couple things. We've got a chat thing over there. I'd like you guys to introduce yourself. Chris Foster's in. Greg is in. I am. I'm very excited about my guests tonight. You know, I haven't seen these guys since it's been about 4 years. But really cool stuff. But before I bring Simon and Lisa on, I wanted to give everybody an update for those of you. And I'm also putting up a little poll in the side. Let me know if this is the first time you've been here. Kind of curious, new people coming in. Anyway, Vertigo. For those of you who are regular watchers of the Journeys Webcast, you know in June, in the middle of COVID, I got hit pretty hard with this vertigo episode, which turned out to be a bit more complicated than just some loose crystals in my ear. Vestibular neuritis is kind of part of what it was. And anyway, I haven't been on a motorcycle since, but I am riding my bicycle. So that's kind of like training wheels, right? Training wheels for this thing. It's like if I move my head real fast, it's like a head rush. Remember when you were a kid, you'd spin around and you'd get dizzy and then you'd stop and you'd kind of go like this. That's what happens to me. I just get that lightheadedness. So I do exercises. I go to physical therapy. It's coming around. My motorcycle, one of them is sitting right out that window behind me. And I can't wait. The battery's dead, but I have a new battery, but I can't wait till the day I can get back on it. So that's at this point, 7 months into my little condition, it's more like it's certainly an inconvenience, and you have some good days and you have some bad days and medium ones in between. Today's kind of a medium day. But that's, you know, that's the nature of it. And as far as the COVID, you know, I'm happy to see many schools are starting to reopen again across the country. I talked to a guy today who said, you know, he never thought he'd end up becoming a full-time teacher. It's not his line of work. But anyway, hopefully you're all doing that. We'll see how Simon and Lisa have been dealing with this too, because this couple has been on the road for 17 years. So being in one place for however long, a year, I know that's going to be tough. So let me tell you about Lisa and Simon Thomas. Okay, this adventurous duo set out to ride around the world in May of 2003, 2 years before I set out on my big trip. Since then, they've crossed 6 continents and logged over 500,000 miles. They've well earned the admiration of me and other peers in this adventure riding community. But now, you know, people call them the adventure riders. So 17 years, they have braved and survived some of the world's harshest environments. And while their journey tested their limits, they never stopped recording, documenting, and sharing the adventure through their popular social channels, their website, and they now have a new website focused just on photography. So this website, though, ToRideTheWorld.com, has become a valuable source of information for those dreaming and for those who are already riding around the world. WorldRiders, yes. They've survived, get this, a broken neck and malaria in the Amazon, been shot at in Russia. They've traversed 36 deserts, were threatened with expulsion after being wrongly accused, can you believe this, of kidnapping a president's son. But that's another story, and I hope we find out today. Now, listen, they've run out of water, squinted at hallucinations, repaired damaged bikes with scraps of airplane parts. They've dined with the Maasai warriors in Africa and with presidents as well. But you know what? The most amazing thing for Simon and Lisa, that's my cat. One of them. That's the Foster. They never stop loving each other through every mile they've traveled. Now, you got to know, some of you maybe have seen them give presentations because they've shared their experiences with live audiences around the globe. They've authored articles for all the top travel and motorcycle publications, and they've made over 40 international TV appearances, written a cookbook, Dirty Dining, we'll talk about that today, and have been the focus of a BBC documentary. But today, their reach really goes well beyond the motorcycle world. The pair have presented and shared their unique insight and life lessons with business leaders and brands such as BMW, Boeing, and Adidas. As authors, photographers, and filmmakers, their work has been seen across 5 continents and enjoyed by millions. Absolutely. I guess you could say Simon and Lisa have wildly contributed to defining and giving us insight and understanding what is now referred to as adventure riding. Join me in welcoming Simon and Lisa Thomas of Ride the World.
Oh my God, we can't live up to all that.
I was listening to that going, wow, that sounds
really interesting. Do you know those guys?
Do you know what? It's so strange. I mean, there's obviously a big part of that. We go, oh yeah, well that happened and that happened, that happened. But after a while, when someone's reading that stuff out, it just sounds like you're talking about some made up character that we're just about to read about. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'll listen to that. I wonder who these guys are. But they've done some bizarre stuff. How are you, Alan?
I'm doing well. How are you guys? Are looking good. I'm curious, where are you and how long have you been there?
Well, we're in sunny Wales. It's normally wet, actually, but we're in Wales in the UK, and we've been here for just over a year now.
And it has been it's been an adjustment, yeah.
Big adjustment.
To set the scene, we are literally in a small wooden shed up a mountain, overlooking the sea.
Got glorious views.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's not a bad place to be if you are going to be holed up, huh?
Well, for us, it's absolutely
We've been very
perfect. Lucky. Yeah, it's very small, which is what we like. There's beautiful views. We can walk straight outside and go straight up into the mountains, or walk down and be on a beach within literally minutes.
We are just inside Snowdonia National Park. So for 2 people that have been outside for 17 years, yeah, for a lot of people this would be very small, but obviously it's 10 times bigger than the tent. But we can go straight outside. We've got somewhere to go. We can escape. Well, we do have friends that have been traveling, had to stop their travels, and they are literally in a 2-bedroom box in the middle of a concrete city, and that for us would be difficult.
Impossible, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you know, I've had a couple riders. You know, I had Jeremy Craker. And when he was locked in Uruguay in a 150 square foot little place in a city, and then Elsaby and Miknis from Picky Overland also were on.
Yeah.
They were stuck in Sucre, which is kind of, we've
not bad.
Sucre's not a bad place to get stuck.
And for those of you who don't know where Sucre is, that is technically the capital of Bolivia, the colonial capital anyway. But
did
you're
you just
in Wales.
The capital of? I swear to God, you just Googled that in 2 seconds. I was like,
no.
Awesome.
The colonial capital is because I was there, and I, like you, I love to carry my camera around, and I was a bit stuck. I broke my leg in Bolivia, so I ended up coming back into Bolivia after being medevaced out. See, you actually got to sample the South American medical system. I did too for a bit, but then I hightailed it out of there. But I want to kind of come back to where you are now And where are the motorcycles, and where did you move when COVID hit? Where were you, and how did you get to Wales?
Well, the motorcycles, for the first time in 20 years, were without motorcycles. And it's almost like we've lost a leg or children, or it was very, very difficult. It still is difficult, actually. And we left them with a friend, and we returned to the UK to see family over Christmas time. And I needed some medical care, some medical attention. And so we actually came back. Was for Christmas on 2019. So December 2019, we were back in the UK.
For a planned 5 weeks.
For just a short period of time. I'd say I needed a bit of a review, medications, etc. And then we became ill, and we didn't know what it was, but I became ill very bad. I spent about 10 days not able to really move, and then Simon became ill.
Although I wasn't hit as hard.
No.
And then this thing called COVID kept being talked about.
And then there was a lockdown, and
yeah.
we couldn't leave, and we've been here ever since. And in that time, our one friend in the States said, "I'm moving house," and we had to rely on another friend to go and take a long journey to go and collect our motorcycles and take them to his place. So at the moment, we've never seen where our motorcycles are.
Oh, well, at the moment, we get to find out how good a friend David is, because David said it was a 7-hour drive there. He got a van. He loaded our bikes. I mean, it's not just our bikes. Everything we own,
helmets,
was
gloves,
with Jeff,
yeah,
who fantastically, him and his wife Susie said, "Look, we'll take care of this stuff. You go back to the UK. We'll come back." Obviously, things changed. They moved house. David did a round trip of like 14, 15 hours. He did it in one day. But right now, everything we owned, our gear, our helmets, our tent, our bikes, are somewhere in Tennessee. And if he's a really good friend, he has really got them, and we will eventually see them again. But it was so odd. We ended up in this cabin here, and there was no running water. I mean, it was pretty basic, and that for us is a fun challenge. We need challenges. But it was like being a teenager again. We didn't have so much as a hammer. It's like, oh, I'll go and fix that because I've got. Oh no, that's in America. Oh, well, I haven't got that tool either. We had nothing. And
we actually didn't have anything to sleep on initially either, because we're so used to, we've got our mats and used to our tent and sleeping bags and things. And say if we kip at a friend's house and we're on the road and the bikes are outside, they might say, "Hey, come on in, put your stuff on the floor there." And we go, "Oh, well, fine. We can make our bed wherever." And then suddenly we're like, we don't have a mattress. We don't have a sleeping bag. We don't have a bed. Luckily, my mother is not too far away, and we did sleep in her spare room, and we're spoiled rotten. And then we're just like, but we have to make sure we've got a bed up here at least. So,
but we were talking before we came on air. It has been a huge change because we often talk about traveling and riding and motorcycling and all the perks and the adrenaline and the passion that brings as a drug. We have literally gone cold turkey. There was no warning. It was just boom, done, and we've just been here for a year now.
Wow. So somewhere in Tennessee, we've got the two Ride the World famous motorcycles, and you're in Wales. What's COVID been there? Like, what's been the evolution? You know, when the first lockdown, are you allowed to go out? I mean, obviously you've got the great wild outdoors there next to a national park, a beach. You know, you're not in a bad spot. But how has it been for the Welsh community and UK in general? I mean, we know that there's, you know,
it's been very hard.
Brutal.
The first lockdown nationwide was March the 23rd, 2020, and that was a complete lockdown. The furthest distance you can travel was 5 miles. Now we're in a rural area.
Well, no, you could only travel 5 miles if you were in a designated rural area.
So 5 miles for us doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't get us to a shop or a pharmacy or anything at all. And so if we were stopped, which we were a few times, we have to say where we live and that we're just traveling to get our basic necessities. Then there was a brief race of
reprieve,
lockdown.
and that which was then okay, if you have an elderly relative or you're caring for somebody, but all that stopped a long time ago. We've been in complete lockdown
Since
now again.
December the 20th, and that means that you are not allowed to go out in your car to exercise or take the dog for a walk or anything like that, unless you have to travel to go to a supermarket, and only the essential items can be
the
purchased.
UK effectively is closed unless it's a food store, and even when you go into the supermarkets, you'll find that the food aisles are open. But if there's an aisle that sells electrical goods or DVDs
and not deemed essential,
they're all just completely closed off. You've got a couple of DIY / kind of do-it-yourself stores that are open that sell essential building goods, but everything is closed. Everything.
Well, I guess that means the pubs are closed too.
Yeah.
And how they're surviving, I don't know, because they've still got bills to pay. Their staff, but they're leasing. The bills are still huge.
Well, I it's been so long since I've seen you, and considering we can't do this in a pub, I want to pour a beer, because in the UK it's beer. Even though I'm usually drinking wine, I think the UK is more known for beer. So Simon, Lisa, cheers to an incredible life, and we're going to talk a lot about it.
And cheers,
Alan. Cheers to you, my friend.
That's so good. So one of the things that I've been talking about a lot on these webcasts is that, you're cold turkey. You haven't sat in one place for so long. Me neither. Is that instead of, focusing on what you're missing or perhaps, what you've lost, is to focus on what you maybe are gaining or learning and seeing that. So what have you guys, I mean, Lisa, you've written a cookbook, so now you have actually a real kitchen there. Are you tossing your culinary craziness in the kitchen and getting Simon to try some new things?
That should be a T-shirt. Are you tossing your culinary craziness?
I like that. Yes. Well, yes. It has been lovely, and one of the things that I really, really appreciated. Actually, there's two. The first one is having a refrigerator. That to me is just amazing.
That is so English, because in America we just say fridge, but as a Brit, and we are becoming more British again. A refrigerator.
It's wonderful to be able to open the door and there's something cold in there. It's
screw
great.
that. I was getting excited the first 2 weeks with the kettle. I was making tea and coffee just because instead of having to go to the panniers and get out the fuel and the stoves and suddenly water, switch, Lisa, boiling. Instant tea and coffee, just the simple little things. The convenience.
The other, literally about 2 weeks ago, we were offered a microwave for free. It's hardly been used, and we're like, nah, we don't want.
No. You were like, no. I was like, nah, bring that on. I can cook in that.
I don't want a microwave. I haven't had a microwave for 20 years. What do I want one of those for? And then he went, I'll give it to you. I don't want anything for it.
It was a shop that was closing down.
And we're like, well, okay then. And we took it away. I'm like, oh my God, this thing, it's a wonder of technology. I love it. So
she doesn't give a damn that it heats food up. What she likes is that it'll heat food up in the plate you're going to eat it in. Therefore, there's no extra washing up. Whereas when you're cooking on the road, which is what we've been doing for 17 years, everything gets very hot. Obviously, on the camping stove, everything kind of cakes on. The washing up and the cleanup can take longer than the food prep. Suddenly, it's just getting used to
mod cons,
absurd speed and convenience.
See, now this is stuff you learn that when you're reintegrating back into this society here. I
mean, there's some more technical stuff that we've looked at. I mean, bearing in mind that we set out, we thought we were going to be traveling for 16 months, not 17 years, and as the years rolled on, you have all these ideas about, as the photography became a much more important part of our journey, wouldn't it be great to do a photo book? Suddenly, we've just put one together. It's taken us 5 months. We've just had the first wet copy. We haven't promoted it or marketed it at all. But that's just one of the jobs and the tasks and the projects that we're able to tick off a very, very long list of you know what, when our traveling either is stopped or paused, one day we'll do this, like organize all the files on the computer,
actually get to
create a backup of our videos and photographs, which we've never had.
Yeah.
Suddenly
actually
we
be
can.
able to sit down and look at the photographs and have the computer power and the electricity to be able to do that. And that's actually made us realize just what we have, how many millions of photographs.
We've now worked out we have just under 1.2 million photographs, and we have 9 terabytes of video, bearing in mind that a lot of it we've never seen.
Yeah, it's
amazing. You click and you put it away.
Yeah, exactly. And now that you're locked down, you all of a sudden have this time, and that's what I've been doing. I have so much stuff now. The difference between my travels and your travels, your photography is so awesome, and you get great shots, the classic adventure riding shots. And we're going to look at some of those. For me, I'm the photographer. I hardly ever get a picture of me, in an adventure environment, unless I do take the time. I carry a little tripod, set it up, but often that's more work than I want to do in terms of trying to establish a shot. So when I love that you guys actually do take the time to shoot, and we're going to talk about that. But I wanted to say that you've got a lot of new projects. We're going to talk about them. I put up on the sidebar there a link to Lisa's book for Dirty Dining, the cookbook, which also has some cool photography in it. So it is a photo book in its way. Obviously, the new one coming out will be much more photo centric. So if anybody wants to check that out, click that link. And I also wanted to just quickly turn over to the chat here, because we've got some Greg is tuning in from Alabama. We've got Zen Grayson, another rider. He's in from the Tetons. Bodie Anderson, you guys know him. He didn't say where he's coming in. Karen's in from New Jersey. Davey from Spokane. Chris, nice to have you. Chris Milanese from old Chatham, New York, not far from where I grew up. So anyway, I feel free to pop in some questions here. But what I thought we would do first is just
I'm nervous.
Come back to that. Talk about that question. You said you were going to go out for 16 months and it's turned into 17 years. What happened in that 17th month that was no turning back?
Well, we hadn't reached where we thought we would have reached, and we got to a certain point, and we'd actually reached South Africa by the time we got to that time. And we went, now is the time for us to return home, because that was the time limit that we had. And we looked at one another and said, are we done? And we went, no, we feel like we've just begun. And then it was the decision making, and how we went about all of that.
We gave ourselves 16 months. We had these, and we've mentioned this a few times, because I think it's really important to discuss how these journeys happen. Because you go online these days, and I've seen a few people who've gone, oh, I sold everything and I plan to travel around the world for 10 years. And
we go, what, are they crazy?
Like, wow, because we definitely did it. And you do compare everybody else's, life journey and ideas to what you feel you compare it to. We came up with this crazy set of goals from the comfort of our bed at the weekend. And I know people think that we're joking about that, but no, we literally poured over travel magazines. Chris Scott's adventure motorcycling handbook was our motorcycle porn. And at the weekends, we would go into the kitchen, look at this massive map on the wall and start creating these crazy routes, and then said, well, let's go to 122 countries. That's what we figured we could do safely. Let's go from the most northerly point to the most southerly point on each continent. And then for shits and giggles, well, let's go from the lowest point to the highest point. And all of this was just on a whim, based on a ridiculously unsubstantiated level of confidence and too much caffeine in the morning.
But we did actually think that we could do that
in 16 months.
In 16 months.
And the reality is you could. The difference is that you wouldn't see very much. You wouldn't learn anything.
Experience anything at all other than just tiredness, I think.
And I think what really surprised us both is instead of visiting 122 countries, a year and a half in, we left the UK, we'd gone through Scandinavia, we'd gone up to Nordkap, we'd entered northwest Russia, which at the time was pretty unusual because we ended up going into Murmansk, which was the home of the Russian naval fleet. No cameras, no tourists. And then down through Europe and then down through Africa. And by the time we'd reached Cape Town for the first time, we'd lost 25 pounds in body weight and had these incredible experiences, challenges, and the rewards for overcoming those. And although we were absolutely exhausted and completely out of our depth, the simple question people ask is, well, why do you keep going? And it comes down to this. We liked who we were. We liked who we are more, owning next to nothing, but filling our lives with these wonderful experiences more than we did surrounded by lots of very nice stuff. Back in the UK, we had a high standard of living, but a low quality of life. And suddenly our lives were full of incredible people, challenges, experiences, cuisine, landscapes. I mean, we were getting up every day going, are we really doing this? And the idea of then going back, and our idea always was to return back to the UK and pick our old lives up in the pursuit of more. And I think even after 16 months, we were thinking, yeah, our priorities have changed.
Going back to what Simon said, which was hearing about people starting off and saying, yeah, I'm going to be on the road and I sold absolutely everything. When we first started, we didn't sell absolutely everything.
No.
We actually rented our house out. And
for the first 3 years.
For the first 3 years, yeah, because we assumed that we were going to be having short-term renters in, and we'd kick them out after 18 months, and we'd just return straight back and slide back into our normal lives again. And it was a career break. It wasn't going to be a life changer. It was
I still had a company that I owned 51% shares in.
We needed to take a step back and just have our brains get back together again, and then head back home. And then when we made the decision to not return, that's when we sold.
Yeah, but the plan then wasn't to not return ever. The plan was, well, you know what? Let's go for years. Let's go for another 6 months. That was our first conversation.
Well, it might have been in your head. Mine was a couple of years, but you know.
let's go for another 6 months or a couple of years in that case. And then by the time we'd reached South America, our revenue had pretty much gone. The guys that I'd sold the other shares in the company had run it into the ground. There was no money coming in, and our house was unrented for 9 months. So trying to pay a mortgage in the UK, zero income, and traveling at the same time was a non-starter. So we made the huge decision to sell the house. But there's no point playing it down. That decision to sell the house took several weeks and some soul searching and some pretty serious conversations.
And we didn't return to do that. No. We'd set up my father as power of attorney, and we just said, can you sell the house for us? And yeah, he did all the work. We had it easy, actually. He did all the work, and he even gave us the money.
Which was nice.
Actually, and he didn't take the 6% commission, did he?
No, he didn't.
Wow.
You sure?
Hey, I see that Janice is on. Is that your mother, Simon?
Oh, God, it is. I hadn't seen that. Hello, Mum. Yeah. What are you still doing up? Bearing in mind, it's 11:30 p.m. our time. Hello.
Well, hey, thanks for staying up. Hey, so briefly, what were your careers before this? You said you had a company, and Lisa, you said it was a career break. So what were you breaking from, and what was your company about?
Well, I had a graphics business, and I owned a telecoms business. So business to business telecoms, everything from office suites, least cost routing, mobile, business to business.
And I was an IT analyst.
No, go on, do the full title.
I can't remember my full title.
You were a
What was
technical
it?
IT computer analyst, and people used to say, "So what does your wife do?" And I said, "Got no idea. I just know that she's smarter than I am."
People would say, "So what do you do?" And I go, "I analyze things."
It's too technical. Okay, it looks like Bodhi's in from Tucson, just kind of following up, and so great to have people tuning in from all over the world.
I can't believe my mum's logged in, and she's actually worked out how to put a comment. Proud parents watching too.
Yeah,
which
so
suggests that my dad's watching as well, but he may just be asleep. I'm not sure. She'll comment in a second.
Yes. Say hello again, Janice. Coming back, as you went, into Russia through Murmansk, and then you eventually found yourself in Cape Town. That journey to Africa wasn't as quick as you thought, right? And I want to show a couple little videos and have you talk to this, because you not only had a big decision about making up sell your house or not, you were deciding how the hell are you going to get to Cape Town. So let's go ahead and run this, and you can kind of talk this. This is part one, I think, if I get this right.
Can we talk over it, or do we
Absolutely.
stay quiet?
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
So what are you going to show?
About,
I don't know.
I'm going to show South Africa, the goal.
Okay.
And option 1 and option 2, that video with the map.
Oh, right. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So we can preempt the map. A friend told us before we left. I said, "Is there any top tips you can give us?" And this was Sam Manicom, who'd spent 8 years traveling. He said,
Sam. Yep.
The best tip I can give you: be flexible. Be flexible in who you meet. Be flexible with your plans. And I took that to heart. And then Africa came along, and Africa is the continent that we fell in love with to this day. We love and fear Africa. It's one of the most stunningly rugged continents, immensely rewarding. But any plans that you have, Africa has absolutely no respect for whatsoever.
And I can agree with that 100%, because I had a whole different set of things that I was going to do, and ended up. Okay, here we go. Part 1 of this, and go ahead and talk to that if you don't mind. Let's see.
Well, our plan had been to go from the west coast through Chad, Sudan, and then down the east coast. But that was a non-starter because Chad, Sudan's border closed. Fighting broke out, and then the famine hit.
So the other option was then to go through Ghana, go through Nigeria, and take a little bit of a tougher route down the west coast. But then we had the problem with the Nigerian Delta area, kidnapping, machete, deaths on the border. And so we went, well, we can't do that either.
And we were driving to the Nigerian border when we found that out. So the guy you saw in the slide a minute ago, after we realized that those two options were out, we went back to Accra, Ghana, and we spent 2 weeks looking at every single option we could think of to get to Cape Town. There was only one, which was to spend money we simply didn't have, put both bikes on a ship and sail to Joburg. But we wanted to ride down, or at least ride as far as we could. And quite frankly, we didn't have the budget to put the bikes on a container. So we did what any right-minded couple would do in that situation. We found a bar and we just got drunk.
And we're sitting in there, sort of like commiserating with each other, going, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And we were approached by Barry. He came on over and said, "Hi, I'm Captain Barry." And we're like, okay.
It's always a bit dodgy when some complete random stranger just walks up to you and says, "Hello, I'm Captain Barry."
And he went, "I got a plane." And
bear in mind, he was more drunk than we were.
He had a few too many. He's like, "I got a plane." We're like, "That's very nice for you. Thank you, Barry." And,
well, you got a bike, I got a plane.
No, but it's just, I mean, seriously, we thought we were being quiet. And we were talking over options, and this guy just comes over and just inserts himself into the conversation. And he was from South Africa, so he had a very heavy South African accent. And he said, "I've got a plan. I can sort it out.
I can fly you down there. You pay for the fuel." And we're like, "Fuel for a plane? Oh my God, how much is that going to be?"
We're thinking 2 bikes. He's obviously got a Hercules.
And he says, I can't what did he say? I'll get you to South Africa. Or in fact, I can get you to the border between Angola and Namibia, but I have to do it all over the sea. I can't fly over land, and I can't fly over Angola because they'll shoot me down.
Because I've got I've got history there, and they'll probably shoot me.
And we didn't want to know.
So
we did not want to ask a question as to why.
So the plan was, we never found out. We didn't want to ask. We genuinely never found out. Although oddly, out of the blue, about 3 months ago, we got an email from Barry, and that was the first time I think we've heard from him, because our email hasn't changed in 20 odd years. So his plan was to fly down to a tiny little island that really isn't visited that often by anybody, called São Tomé and Príncipe. I know 2 people who have been there, and both travel extensively, refuel, and then fly down to the Angolan border. So basically, we in our hungover state, we remember that, okay, didn't we arrange to meet this guy in 2 days' time at this airport? So we turn up at the airport, which turns out to be the Ghanaian International Airport. We hand over our ID at security. They wave us across, and following their directions, we then go into panic mode when we realize that we are riding across the main international runway and planes are landing.
So we eventually reach where Barry said that his plane would be. And as we turn on up, I go, that can't be it. It's tiny. There's no way our 2 large motorcycles will get inside that thing. And with us, I just don't know what we're going to do. This is a twin-propped, non-cargo bearing plane. So it's not designed to take as much weight. But more importantly, it's just designed to have a couple of small steps that people walk up and sit down. What was incredible, even to this day, is we rolled up, looked at this plane and went, well, that's not going to happen. Barry turns up. Right, you ready to do this, he says. He was quite willing for us to go ahead. We ended up stripping the entire plane. Quick side note, the left-hand side, the engine broke down as we were taking off. It was an oil leak. We ended up spending an hour and a half fixing it. But we gutted the plane. We pulled out every single seat, the walls, the floor, the toilet, everything. And then we had the Ghanaian airport fire crew, who were very bored, literally throw the bikes in. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got them in. And then we flew down to São Tomé with the bikes right next to us.
Were they did you use tie downs, or you just kind of flopped them on and just let them, they're not obviously not putting them on the side stand or the center stand. They're just thrown in there with everything else.
We used tie downs, and but then we had nowhere to tie them down. It's a non-cargo bearing plane. So we ended up tying them down to the large metal structures where the seats were bolted in, because all the seats were all now taken out. And then as we're taking off, bearing in mind we've just spent an hour fixing the engine, the right hand side engine, as we're taking off, Barry turns to us and says, yeah, we're pretty heavy, we're going to need the whole runway. Bearing in mind this is an international runway that Boeings take off on. And as we're taking off, he then says, you guys do know what to do if we ditch in the water, don't you? And then there was that awkward pause for the punchline that never came.
So what do you do then?
I don't know. He never told us.
So
yeah, and it's probably, I mean, I would guess that there's probably nothing that you can do.
If that plane hits the water, we're all toast. Well, no one's getting out.
Especially when you think about how many regulations that broke, but only in Africa.
So this cat just turned off my light, but I turned it back on. This is my foster. This is Dice, by the way.
Beautiful.
I swear to God, I'm going to avoid all the obvious pussy jokes right now.
Beautiful cat. Oh,
that's Dice. So, if things go on, and you're locked down for another couple years, I can send you Dice, because Dice is looking for a home. Because my other cat, Dar, wants nothing to do with him. She's just a little princess and wants all the attention.
Was Dar named after the capital city of Tanzania?
How did you know that you are the only person who has got that right? Exactly.
Seriously?
Yes, because
That's what
I ended up spending a couple weeks in Dar, and that's all they call it. They just call it Dar,
Yeah,
right?
Dar,
It's,
yeah.
you know, nobody says Dar es Salaam. They'll say Salam, of course, but not the full name. So it became very affectionately. And I also went out to Zanzibar, and I rented a motorcycle out on that island. I didn't actually ship the bike out there, but yes, Dar. So thank you for pointing that out. That's pretty cool. So your mom says that she's yawning a bit, but she's always let me pull that back up, mesmerized by you guys. So there you go.
I think she's biased and tired.
Yeah.
But I can't. I mean, it's funny. We haven't mentioned. Again, this story is fresh in our minds because we've just given a couple of classes at a boot camp, an online adventure boot camp over the weekend. But there are so many of these little stories that we were pulling up that we've not thought about for a while. And for Lisa and I, you know, it's what Lisa and I remember of that particular story is how pragmatic we became and just how tired we were. But hearing it almost as a third person, it does sound slightly crazy now revisiting that same story. Although, yeah, a lot of it was just, well, because somebody online said, that couldn't happen anywhere else. Oh, my God, I couldn't have done that. And Lisa and I went, but it was just a solution to a problem.
Yeah, I think you have to just break it down into small chunks. And I mean, you know this from the traveling. If you to look at the whole picture and the whole problem,
it's overwhelming.
You would just go and curl up in a ball somewhere. But if you can just take little chunks of it and go, okay, so we got there, the plane is very small. How are we going to get the bikes on? That was one problem. And then the next problem was, okay,
how are we going to take off?
How is it going to take off? And is it going to stay in the air? Not our problem, his problem. And then, okay, we're going to have to land on a border where we didn't think that we were going to land.
Without any customs or paperwork.
Are we going to have the correct paperwork and be legal when we arrive? But you can't take in that whole picture. Otherwise, well, you wouldn't leave on this kind of journey. You'd end up maybe never going or just returning home and going, I can't cope.
Well, it's if you let fear drive your decision making, you'll never do anything. And or if the idea of the unknown is part of that fear, the frightenedness, And when you quoted Sam on his, just be prepared to adapt or to
be flexible.
One of the things I always say to people, I travel with no itinerary because you have to be open and ready for, not only you might get forced to change your plans, but sometimes you might just want to change your plans.
Yes.
And if you've already for the best, plan for the worst. And try to travel without expectations, because if you leave with a bag full of expectations, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be disappointed. But if you go out with an open mind and you leave your expectations behind, and that is very difficult to do, chances are you're going to be surprised and delighted and thrilled by the memories that you're able to create.
Yeah. I do talks like you guys, and often there's somebody might raise their hand and ask, they're curious questions. Do you ever run out of gas? Where did you, blah, blah, blah. But the one that always gets me is, what was the most important thing you brought with you? What did you pack? What's the most important tool? You went, well, you know what I say, it took, I scratched the head. It was a tough thing. And I said, patience. If you don't bring your patience. I had to remember what patience was. I left the UK. Angry. It took me a long time to realize that, but no, I left the UK angry and frustrated. Lisa doesn't have a lot of patience anyway. But again, we were talking about this with friends recently, and someone said, has the journey changed you? And obviously there's a 1,000 different examples as to how, but fundamentally we both went, we're a lot more laid back and a lot more patient. When you're stuck at a border for 3.5 days, purely because the guy who's meant to check the passport went on lunch 3 days ago.
Yeah, he decided to go home. for lunch.
So
home was a long way away.
I mean,
we got a big bender.
You must be the same. You get back, and the things that you would have thought of as problems before you left, because traveling gives you such a different perspective. You go through these countries where people really are struggling. It gives you a very different perspective as to what is an inconvenience and what is a problem.
I've noticed that being back in the UK, there's a sense of urgency. Everybody's very rushed, and I mean it is a lot more relaxed here in Wales. But coming through some of the large cities when we were returning before, it was rushed. And there was no time for anything, and even here, when you want an answer and you want an answer right now and you don't want to hang around for it, and why is this person not attending to you straight away? And I can now just sit back and just chill.
If it doesn't happen, that's okay. No one's going to die.
I can sit, well, before lockdown, and sit in the doctor's surgery, and okay, the doctor's running late. Okay, so
it's not
he's running late.
Before you'd be quite wound up, but then you realise that it's not personal. It's just life happening, and it's not you're not the middle of it. Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting because you talk about all through how we've been talking here is solving problems, overcoming challenges, which is of course a big part of it. And I'm curious because for me, one of the most rewarding parts of traveling are solving problems. Is that those are the rewards when you have accomplished something. You've fixed the engine on the airplane on the runway, or you figured out you met a guy in a bar. I mean, you've repaired your bike and used chicken wire and some duct tape.
It was actually airplane brake pads in the Amazon. Yeah, but especially problems that you didn't know you could solve before you tried.
Yeah. It's good. Hey, I want to talk about, because you just mentioned, waiting for the doctor and surgery, and I'm curious how long you had to wait in the Brazil and in the Amazon, because you had a bit of a problem with a bridge, and we have a little video of this too that we can play. But maybe you could frame it for us, because this, to me, and I was actually in South America at the time this happened, and you and I we're exchanging some emails either before or after this. I can't remember the exact timing, but we were hoping maybe to cross paths, but we never did till,
No, illness had a different direction. So a quick framing is that after Africa, we were over at South America, into Argentina, up through the East Coast. And we'd heard about a route through the Amazon jungle. Now, again, as Brits, there's a few locations that we're just mesmerized by. So, for example, growing up as kids, if you wanted to describe somewhere a long way away, you'd say out of Mongolia. So to get to Mongolia was a big deal. And for some reason, growing up, there was always the idea of an explorer. He was either in the Sahara or the Amazon, because it's the Amazon jungle. So there was a route in the Amazon jungle we'd heard about. A few people had tried it on small bikes. It used to be a maintained route. It was closed down 25 years earlier, so the jungle had just reclaimed it. There were small patches of tar, but basically it was just jungle. We had ropes, we had pulleys, but our plan was to be the first motorcyclists to ride north to south on large capacity bikes with our gear. We genuinely thought we were up to it. We had it all planned out. We got ourselves to Manaus, which meant getting ourselves onto a boat somehow. This isn't something you can do easily, but it was a 7-day sailing up the Amazon to get to Manaus. And at that point, we were going to check weather, local advice. We ended up buying extra ropes and pulleys because we knew that there were going to be obstacles that you couldn't ride, that we'd simply have to work out how to get over cracks or water or fallen trees or whatever.
Chainsaw?
No, not quite. But the bottom line is, if you set out to have an adventure, you have to also realize that things can go wrong. It doesn't matter how well prepared you are. It doesn't matter what your skill set. The skill set really actually comes into play when things do go wrong, and then you're tested under pressure. And the Amazon section arguably is the most painful and the toughest part of our 500,000 miles so far. And yet at the same time, it's the period of our journey that we look back on with the greatest sense of pride.
Yeah. You know, fellow adventure rider Glenn Hegstead, you know, he's famous for saying, you know, the adventure starts when things stop going as planned.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of truth to that. So we're gonna play this video a bit, and
okay.
And we'll talk to this rope. Now you're loaded up with ropes, pulleys, you know, probably some more
a lot of extra fuel.
And extra fuel and water, all of that stuff. So what were the bikes you were riding at this time? Because you've been through a series of bikes, at least a couple anyway.
Yeah, just two each. Simon was on both BMWs, the R1100 GS at that time, and I was on the F650 GS. And I would say very strong bikes. My bike, especially. Well, you know the bike. Very strong, hard-wearing bikes, and they will take you anywhere. I always say when people say, "Oh, my bike won't do that," I go, "It's not the bike; it's the rider." It's often the rider that won't do it. The bike will always do it.
And somehow it always sounds better with an English. Oh, it's not the bike, it's the rider. I mean, she's able to insult people and get away with it just because of the Mary Poppins accent.
This is true, and Lisa and I have that in common, that we both ride the same bike, or we did at the time. And I still have mine. You know, I know you guys. In fact, I saw. I was with you when you more or less took delivery of the new bikes, when they were all wrapped with the new graphics and things at Dan's place in
Riverside BMW. Yeah.
We still have the old bikes. They're in a museum.
They're at Bob's BMW Museum in Maryland.
Oh, they are. Oh, at Bob. Okay. Yeah. You got to watch him. He might try to throw a sidecar on those things. You got to be careful.
That's never happening.
Okay, so this is the Amazon. This is the most incredible journey, treacherous thing I've ever seen. Now, I had Ryan Pyle on here several months ago, and he also rode in this Amazon, not on this road, but it happened to be a little bit too.
Actually, are you sure? Because I watched some of Ryan's stuff, bearing in mind that in the last 4.5 years, they've been investing money reopening this track.
Oh.
It was this road.
It was this road. Oh my God! So
the BR319.
Okay, let's watch the video. Yeah, because he looks. That's the worst I've ever seen him look, and he admits the same thing. So you guys share that there. I never got there. Here we go. So let's see. We'll maybe put these.
So our plan was to get ourselves to Belen onto some kind of boat, and then take a 7-day journey up the Amazon River to get to the capital city of Manaus. Those are our photographs. There's a few images. Getting the bikes on was interesting. And then our attempt was going to be to go north to south from Manaus down to Porto Velho. Now, normally that's river only, because the route that was there was closed 25 years ago, and literally the jungle claimed it back. And it was the morning of the second day when we'd come to the worst bridge so far. Bearing in mind, the bridges used to be there, but when we attempted this ride, there had been no maintenance, no upkeep. So although there's patches of asphalt, they're
literally just patches.
They are just patches. I mean, our worst day was we were making forward progress in conditions that you can see on the right for 8.5 hours. We made it 6 kilometers. I've never hated GPS as much in my life, because all you were looking at was how far you hadn't been. And it's 100% humidity, which means it's like breathing. It's like being waterboarded. And that, I think the next little video you've got coming up is just, we put together a couple of clips. Do you have the other video where it says day 1, day 2?
Is that not on this one? I think it just stopped on me because I was pausing it, and
okay, it might be coming up then.
Yeah. Yeah, because this is where I had it paused, and I guess this software platform I used didn't like me.
Actually, no. The piece I'm referring to is actually a video.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about a minute.
So
it's about a minute and a half. But that gives you an idea as to exactly how in the middle of nowhere we were.
So that was the first day, and not looking too bad actually. And then this is what happened the morning of the second day. And from there onwards, it just became worse and worse. And a lot of people might say, well, so after Simon had his accident, why did you not turn around and head back to Manaus?
Pause on that slide for a second if you can, Alan.
Yeah, I did.
And we said, because for one thing, we knew what it was like on the first day, 2 days we had of traveling. And we only assumed that going forwards, it couldn't be any worse than that. It must get better. It didn't actually. But then Simon, we didn't actually realize just how injured Simon was at the time.
Well, which sounds strange. Let's get that some perspective. When I fell from the bridge, the wood simply gave way. And without going into a lot of detail, I was unconscious for about an hour. Lisa was just waiting for me to come round.
I wasn't just waiting. I was doing all the hard work.
Okay, you did all the hard work. I was just lying there. When I did regain consciousness, it was another 5 hours until I could actually get to my feet. And I was taking some huge painkillers, but I was blind in my left eye, paralyzed on my left-hand side, which sounds terrifying and scary, and it was. But I remember very clearly when I regained consciousness and I was just led there, surrounded by this sweet smelling earth and greenery, I thought, let me see if I can move my fingers and toes. And they responded. So the very first thing that went through my head was, okay, at least my neck's not broken. As it turns out, it was. I broke it in 2 places and my C6 was dislocating, and the blindness and the paralysis was because my C6 was cutting into my spinal cord. We finally got to Sao Paulo Hospital, and obviously we carried on riding. It was a week and a half to get out of the jungle, and then a little bit longer to get to the hospital. And quite literally, the doctors and the nurses said, "We have no idea how you're here. Had your C6 moved a fraction of a millimeter more, your spinal cord would have been cut." When did this happen? And I said 3 weeks ago. No, you don't understand. You don't understand. And I spoke Portuguese at the time. And I said, no. And I kept saying 3 weeks and each doctor that would come in spoke slightly better English, until finally this absurdly good looking doctor, she was swooning, said, when did this happen? And I explained 3 weeks. And he said, well, what have you been doing in those 3 weeks?
Riding a motorcycle,
riding motorcycles, rebuilding bridges, carrying bags, slogging through the jungle. So whether it's blind luck or a guardian angel or divine intervention, but at the same time, Lisa was getting very ill with malaria. Again, we didn't know it at the time, but because my brain had said, my neck's not broken, even in spite of the blindness and the paralysis, we both thought to ourselves naively, okay, around the next bend, it's going to get better. I rode both bikes across the bridge after the fall. I have no. Yeah, this
is insane. Do you
I have no, not at all. No.
And then I carried the bags over. Simon took the bikes over. Simon's bike broke down because it had been on its side so long, and the fluids had gone into places where they shouldn't go.
The entire wiring loom was fried, and the rear subframe was broken on both sides. So it was 3 days by the side of the road. Basically trying to repair something that we didn't know we could repair. But desperation's the mother of all tutors, right?
If I remember rightly, I even towed you, didn't I? At one point, I towed him through the mud. So that's my F650 towing the 1100 with Simon on it, who's not functioning very well, through mud, which is over your knees. And I think that's the only time on the journey where I've said, I just can't do this. And I think I had a little bit of a cry, and then I did it.
And was there a post-mortem like, I can't do this anymore? No.
No, because then you just go, you just got to do it and just carry on. And we actually have had people go, I just couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I'd just sit down on the side of the road and wait. And we go, wait for what? There was nobody coming to get us.
See, we genuinely don't think that we did anything different to what anybody else would have done. The only difference is perhaps we did it a little bit sooner. Once there were certain people who, I mean, bearing in mind, for me, it was easy. I'm unconscious. In that hour, Lisa's had to come to terms with the idea that if I don't regain consciousness, she has to somehow get back to Manaus and leave my body there, because unconscious, there is no way she's going to be able to get me onto the back of her bike and then ride a day and a half back through the jungle to safety with me on the back of the bike.
I know you wouldn't have been there.
And there's no cell coverage here. You're not carrying a sat phone at this point.
Nothing.
I mean,
nothing.
You're and nobody really knows you're there.
Well,
our parents did. We said, look, if we're leaving from here, we're going to get to here. If you don't hear from us in 21 days, call the embassies.
And my father was actually, he was just on the verge of looking into, okay, so I won't tell your mother, but I'm beginning to look into what do I do now, because he hadn't heard from us.
Bearing in mind, point A to point B shouldn't have been 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It should have actually been 9 days.
And I think it would have been. I don't think there would have been any additional days on there had we not had the bridge fall away. I think we'd have guesstimated the time quite well, really.
But my point being is that nobody wants to be in that situation, but there's always that degree of do I have those inner reserves of mental and physical strength to deal with something as challenging as this? And no one really knows until you're actually in that situation, and nobody wants to be in it. But anybody else would have done the same. Some would have done it faster, simply made a decision and gone, well, okay, well, this now needs to happen, then this, and then this, and then we'll be okay. Even the people that said, well, I'd have sat down at the side of the path and just cried. Okay, you may have done. But at some point, that instinct to survive overpowers everything else. And at some point you go, okay, I'm crying and I'm wailing, but no one's coming to get me. Nothing else is going to happen. I need to do something, and I need to carry on doing something until I physically can't do it anymore.
Can do something. And the other thing, it's interesting in that moment, and I relate a story, and nowhere near as treacherous as that. I broke my leg in Bolivia, but one of the things, not only is Lisa wondering, okay, when's he going to come around, and she's not freaking out because she picks up the camera and takes the pictures.
Yeah, my mum was not impressed by that.
Yes. I just knew that had I not recorded what went on, that Simon would have been quite annoyed. You didn't get any pictures? Really? Seriously? And I was just keeping my mind occupied. I checked that he was still alive, because it had actually crossed my mind, and the way he was looking, that he might not be. And then I got to busying myself with the motorcycle and removing the bags, because the bike was teetering on the edge of the bridge, and I thought that it might fall.
The engine's still going, the rear wheel's still spinning.
So just doing all the practical jobs. And then another practical job was, well, okay, I'll take some pictures. So, my mind went very practical, very methodical. I'll do this. Okay, now do that. And as I said, step by step, little by little.
I was lying on my back. The panniers had crushed my leg in the road from Potosi to Salar de Uyuni. Yeah. And I had a little point and shoot. So the bike's like on top of me, and I had a point and shoot camera that was attached to kind of where my gas, even though it's not the gas tank, but that part of the bike. So I grabbed the camera and I looked up as these kids were coming and bringing umbrellas to shield me from that brutal high altitude sun. And they were shielding me there. I handed the camera to another guy, and I said, will you please just take pictures? Just keep taking pictures. I mean, he looked at me like I was nuts, but I'm like, no, I mean, I'll get out of here. I know I will somehow. Hey, just time goes so crazy. Usually we keep these things to an hour, but I want to know if you can stick around some more. I know people want to, we're just kind of getting into it. And for those of you who kind of just recently tuned in, I'm Allan Karl, host of Journeys Webcast. My guests are Simon and Lisa Thomas of To Ride the World. They've spent traveled 500,000 miles going through 122. Actually, how many countries is it? Did you get to the 122 or?
No, because we're just on the I call it the pandemic pause at the moment. So we're at 80.
Okay, so we're at 80. Actually, that's how many I went to. 80. We're even, but you got a lot more miles than I do. That's for sure.
Hey, Alan, you know that slide you were showing a minute ago, and I said pause the black slide because the Amazon story gets touched on a lot, but that slide gives insight into the part of the story that we rarely ever share. If you still have
let me pull it up again. Yeah, absolutely. Let me bring that up again. And
because the funny thing is, after the accident, then it got worse.
Look at this. Okay, so go ahead, read through these. This is crazy. So
basically, we've got through the Amazon, we've rebuilt a number of bridges, and we're almost out of the Amazon, and we are just 5 miles north of the very first village after Manaus. And we completely run out of fuel. We end up spending the entire night sleeping on the back of our bikes with my head hanging off the bike.
Because we didn't want to sleep on the floor because of
she had malaria. I had a broken neck, and obviously spiders and snakes on the floor, and there were a lot. One anaconda we saw was huge, and the night before the bridge fall, we'd seen a jaguar. So we find the following morning there's some guys passing, and I flag him down, and I think that she look at desperation. I go in and get some fuel. We get that sorted. We have 2 days in Umaita. Things get worse for us physically, and we have to start pushing to Sao Paulo. 1,000 miles east of Sao Paulo, the rear wheel bearing of my 1100 goes. Now, for anyone that isn't technical, the wheel bearing basically connects the rear wheel to the rest of the bike and makes the wheel turn. And when the wheel bearing goes, you take it to a specialist BMW center who use a massive cutting device to take the old bearing off, because this is super heavy duty, and they use a massive press to put the new bearing on. Well, luckily, I had a bearing. I'd kept it from the beginning. We
just happened to have a bearing.
Well, it was one of those things that I thought, okay,
it would be difficult to locate.
So we only took spares that we knew that we probably couldn't find on the road, and if it broke, the bike stops working. But this massive bearing is pressed onto this crown gear, so we ended up taking refuge in an agricultural school, who by some miracle happened to have a freezer. Now, this is in the middle of rural Brazil. Freezers are not normal. So this is the solution. I took the rear of the bike off, bearing in mind I'm still blind and my left-hand side still isn't working. We put the crown gear, which is the big metal piece, in the freezer overnight, took the bearing and got it as hot as we could the following day in a pan of oil, and then with the thickest gloves we could, manhandled them to, hit the crap out of them with a hammer, and put the two together. So the crown bearing had restricted, the metal was so cold, and the bearing had swollen to the point we can get them on. We then carry on 600 miles outside of Sao Paulo. I'm now passing out a dozen times a day. Lisa's doing the same because of malaria. The whole sensor dies of my bike, and hers now won't start. This is the universe saying stop. In Argentina, months earlier, someone had said, oh, if you ever get to Brazil, here's a buddy of mine. He works for BMW. So in desperation, we call this number. We have no idea who it is. Turns out the guy we were calling, who answered the phone, was Andrés Thusi, who was the then vice president of BMW Motorrad Brazil. He sent a van to collect us and bring us to Sao Paulo, the last 600 miles.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up, can you?
We shouldn't be here.
You guys, oh my goodness. I've got to say, there's some really great comments in the sidebar. Rudy Max is joining us. He's a Emmy award-winning travel host, but he's not a motorcyclist, and he's just going OMG, and And Herb Anderson, who used to own a BMW. Thanks for joining us, Herb. He says the volume. Does anyone have volume? Is that from me or our guests? Because I've got the headphones. I'm hearing them too good. I hope
you can hear pretty well.
Yeah. So this guy, what a legend, and talk about a guardian angel. The VP.
And we are still in contact with Andres today.
Well, we're still in contact with the guardian angel too, I think.
Yeah, I
really do think we've told this story with all the little additions at the end and all the problems that built up, and they're going, somebody up there was telling you stop. And the only way they could do that was just make sure both motorcycles wouldn't work. And I do think that had Simon carried on the last 600 miles, that possibly it was about a millimeter away. It
wasn't.
Well, less.
It was 1/3 of a millimeter. That's what the doctor said in the hospital.
That his spinal.
And you're riding on a bike that's bouncing.
Yes,
exactly.
For 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But then Lisa wanted some attention, so I get into hospital. Bearing in mind she doesn't come in because she's got malaria and we don't know it.
I'm feeling a bit ill and I don't know what's wrong with me.
We take the bikes to BMW first because we didn't have the money to get them fixed. But let's just put the bikes, and then Andrea says, "I think I need to take you to the hospital." So we did have medical insurance at the time, so he takes us to the Albert Einstein Memorial Hospital, which is very posh. I get surgery. I was on the operating table for 13 hours. The insurance company wasn't happy because the bill for the operation alone was 220 grand. And I'm surprised that when I get released, Lisa's nowhere to be found. So I have this card that has a hotel on that the insurance company are paying for. I've never been there because I went straight to hospital. Right. So I go back to the hotel, which wasn't great. The elevator's not working, so I'm all bandaged up. I can't talk because they open me up from the front. And I get upset. She's unconscious with a temperature of 104. I pick her up. I carry her back down 5 flights of stairs. I take her back to the hospital I've just come from. She gets diagnosed with full onset malaria and was in hospital in the room next to where I was for 1 day longer than I was in my neck. Oh. You've got to laugh.
This is just mind-boggling. And how long ago was this? That was 2005.
That was 2006.
2006.
Yeah. And then we got better, and then we rode down to Ushuaia.
And this is where we missed each other.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Wow. So, shifting gears a minute to that extraordinary story, and one of the things that we've talked about, you just did a master class for the Armchair Adventure Festival. Photography has consumed you. We're going to look at some photography, but you're like you said, what do we find and discover and learn in a pandemic? We got time to actually go through 1.2 million photos or so, and for me, going through video footage that is less than dramatic because I don't have anyone. It's a lot of perspective. So trying to make something out of this is what I've been doing. You've been doing some great things with photos. So I'm going to bring up some of your great photography and some of your you do presentations, so some of this comes out of your presentation. The first slide is just a reminder that in the sidebar is that Dirty Dining is an adventure cookbook that Lisa puts together because she's the one maintaining the kitchen while Simon is dealing with the freezer and bearings.
I'm the bike bitch. It's her trip. I just lift up the bikes when they fall. She's the thinker and the writer and the cook and the chef.
I like it. Okay, we're gonna take our little photos here. Let's see if I can put them in the best spot so we can really see. What else do we have?
Let's have a look. And the long and the short of it was largely because that was the name of the presentation we just given, and we had all these, artsy reasons. And Lisa went, "How did you get that title?" I went, "Because I'm 6'3", you're 5'2". Long and short.
The long and short of it. There you go. Too funny. This is to remind people that our guests have been traveling until pandemic, until COVID locked them down for 17 years, 2003 to 2020. And this is just an epic shot. Where was this taken? And
that was heading up towards the Tajikistan border on the Silk Road. So yeah,
and Simon did just reach the top of the slight incline there, and I'm shouting at him. Luckily, we've got comms between us, and I'm saying stop, just before he popped over the edge, because it was just it just puts everything into perspective. You're but a speck on the horizon, and you've got these absolutely magnificent mountains.
I remember this day because that night we were camping, and it was -28.
Oh. And that's Celsius, so that's
it was pretty cold.
Yeah, it was.
Anything minus just sounds way too cold.
Yeah.
Great photo. Good. See, this is where I as a solo traveler, I miss stuff like this. Nobody's reading into my comms saying, "Hey, wait, whoa, hold it, let me just."
Exactly. So
this is really, really. I love this shot. It is just so cool.
There are certain landscapes that just make you feel utterly insignificant, and I think that's a really good thing, to go into these areas and just be reminded, actually how small and unimportant we actually are.
Yeah. It's amazing when you have that, when you can get that perspective, and you can visually great work on the photography and
thank you,
Lisa. Yeah. Now, we talked about your goals earlier, but we may as well talk to this shot. That we love these kinds of red rock landscapes, and a gravel road. There's little patches of green grass, but you look at this, you're still definitely out there. Now, how did you get this shot, and where are we?
Well, we're in. I design all the routes, so when it does really go wrong, it really is my fault. So I decided that I wanted to try crossing Australia, but from the most northeast point to the southwest point, so going diagonally across Australia.
Because for her, going east to west wasn't tough enough.
And so
it wasn't long enough either, right? Yeah.
So it's almost it's 2,600 miles of just red dirt and sand and extreme temperatures, and lots of kangaroos. And this was, I can't remember where we are exactly on this. I think we're possibly already past Alice Springs and heading on out across towards Perth. And the problem is with this kind of shot, it looks absolutely wonderful, but you have to then use the tripod.
This is me saying to Lisa, because I carry the tripod. So basically, the simple answer is there is no easy way of getting these shots. It does take a lot of discipline.
And time.
And although we look at all these photographs and we enjoy them, Lisa and I are also very cognizant of the millions of photographs that would have been fantastic that we don't have because we just didn't have the mental fortitude, the discipline to stop, get the tripod out, because this is me saying to Lisa, okay, hang on, I can see a shot. Hang on, stop. I drive up, I put the camera up, I get the tripod out. I focus roughly where Lisa and I are in the shot. I set the camera up to then take shots every 5 or 10 seconds. I think this was a lot faster. This was every 2 seconds because it was very, very bright. So the camera's now clicking away. Lisa and I drive at a shot. We then drive through the shot, but not too quickly, because if we drive too quickly, we'll end up being blurred. And also, the sand is creating such dust that we don't want to drive too close together or too quickly. Otherwise, all you get is one giant photograph of dust. We then come past the camera. Lisa stops, I stop, I go over, I have a look at what ends up being about 200 shots.
And you repeat the process.
This is where I respect the discipline, because as a solo traveler, I sometimes I just blow it off,
But this is also why we have so few photographs of both of us together.
Right. And this is an epic shot, and you're right about the dust. Oh my God! And then of course, as you're riding by that, a lot of that dust is falling on your camera, so you've got to be cognizant about keeping that clean. There. Let's go on here just to talk about kind of where you've been, and this is shows you the breadth and the depth.
I've not seen that for a while.
Well, we were just before the pandemic started, and we were over here, just as I said, getting some medical stuff sorted. We were aiming to head back over to the East Coast, pick up the bikes, and I'd started doing inquiries and costing out shipping the bikes over to Africa, so that we could return to those areas in Africa that we weren't able to reach because of problems with border restrictions or war zones, and things change rapidly in Africa, so you've got to keep on top of things. And we were going to then carry on up, do the whole of the East Coast, and then go into Eastern Europe from there. So yeah, that is still a massive area there that we want to get back to.
When we were there originally, we were very, very green. We didn't really have this. Well, we didn't have the skills we have today. We didn't have a video camera. We had a tiny little 3.2 megapixel point and click,
which was great at the time.
Absolutely fantastic. But my first photograph was on the day we left. I'd never picked up a camera, never held a camera, had no interest. My love of photography started the day we left on the trip.
And I used to just take snaps.
So of course now we're desperate to go back to Africa. It's still our favorite continent. It's very hard not to feel passionate and want to share it.
Yeah, you that whole ride from where you, it looks like you got almost to the bottom of Lake Victoria there. So Rwanda and Uganda, and then obviously, and then as you go north into Ethiopia through Sudan. Now I got to go through Sudan, but there were no overlanders at that time. I won't bore you with that whole story. But that road that goes from Khartoum to Wadi Halfa, where you pick the ferry up to go to Aswan, now it's all paved. And and
I love that you said that.
Unfortunately, there's so many areas now that we've actually said to people about going from the Wadi Bou to Nouakchott on the west coast in Mauritania, and we were talking to was a young lad, and
he'd done the same thing.
He said, "Yeah, I did that route." And we're like, "Wow, that's really cool, isn't it?" It's a bit tough. He went, "No, not really." And
we were talking about the sand dunes, and I mean the real Sahara, gigantic sand dunes, no help, no support, no fuel,
water,
the beach crossing at the end, the waves hitting you.
He went, "No, there's a road and there's a gas station." We're like, what?
Oh my God.
I was really dejected that he really wasn't impressed with my Sahara story. He went, "Well, I just took the road."
And we went, there was no road when we did it, and we didn't want to go when we did it.
But talk about taking the wind out of your sails. So, no, I just went to the gas station and took the road.
Well, and a lot of this, is that road and I don't know in Western Africa, but the one in Eastern, that road we were just talking about, of course, all paid by the Chinese. And when I was in Ethiopia, on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere were 100 guys digging a trench, and then there was a Chinese guy next to a truck with a big spool. It must have been about 5 foot high spool of fiber. They were laying fiber to the remote part of southern Ethiopia. So not only are they paving the roads, and I don't blame this on the Chinese at all. They're looking for natural resources, but they're also connecting it, with fiber. But,
there were huge sections of the Silk Road that were more challenging than they should have been because the Chinese were blowing it up, taking mountains down and laying asphalt. Huge sections of Mongolia now, I think Ulaanbaatar down to the Langsedad near the Gobi Desert is mostly paved. Almost all the Route of 40 in Argentina, as a legendary road, it's almost all paved.
Yeah.
And it's a very strange situation because for people that live there, obviously it's a godsend. It's infrastructure, it improves lives, etc. So I think we have to be a little careful that when we talk about these things being paved, and I do talk about it with a degree of disdain, it is absurdly selfish. Because it is
selfish. You're right. Because it's what right do we have to want them to stay stuck in time somewhere, as opposed to being from the UK and me from the US having great infrastructure of on the planet. Yeah.
But I do think that when we were traveling, Alan, I think that the three of us were quite lucky in some of the areas that we managed to get to, especially, Argentina, the time that we were all there and experiencing Route 40 as I think it was most famous for.
It is fun to say. Say it again, Alan.
Ruta 40.
Ruta 40.
And then also get into Mongolia, where we did 15 kilometers of asphalt
in 6
heading
weeks
south from Ulaanbaatar, and then that was it. There was
the
nothing.
rest of it was dirt, sand, corrugation, and desert.
Oh, the corrugation, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I have to point out on this slide, 2 riders, 6 continents, 36 deserts, 80 countries, but it's 500,007 miles. Okay.
Yes. Very important. It's like when you're 59 and a half.
Actually, it's more than that. But I got that number because whilst we were here, I finally sat down and I joined up all the GPS details. And then we threw that into an Excel spreadsheet to get the exact mileage. But in South America, we lost almost all of our GPS detail from the tip of Argentina, Tierra del Fuego, up to Colombia. We don't have.
Yeah.
So that's literally what I can prove.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned where they were blowing up the road. The Chinese were blowing up the road, building the road, and made it even more difficult to ride. I was just in September 2019, going from Baku in Azerbaijan to Tbilisi, and they're doing the same thing there. They're building these massive bridges too. But it's a nightmare, not necessarily because it's the road is hard to ride. It's got dirt in parts and paved dirt in parts, but it's the traffic. The traffic, because it's just it's the only route from the Black Sea to the capital. And I mean, no, I shouldn't say the only route. I'm sure there's another way to do it, but the only route I could find. And they have no respect. Georgia must have been the worst country, or possibly Romania, where there is no respect for space behind you when you are on a road where there are vehicles. And it's, as you know, as a motorcyclist, it's the most unnerving thing when somebody is that close behind you and you don't, but
and you're trying to bounce over rock, gigantic rocks in the road, and you're thinking,
if I go, I'm going to be toast because they're just going to run straight over me and probably not even notice.
For us, the country that was like that was India. It was strange. In India, we were bumped off the road 2, 3, 4 times per day, which sounds horrific to most Americans and most Europeans. Never once was it angrily. We didn't see road rage once. It's just that there isn't traffic in India. There's just this large moving dance that somehow doesn't end up with the roads being awash in blood. A guy would come onto a road, literally hit my pannier, and obviously the bike's being big and heavy, you can take a hit and you've got that momentum going forwards. And then he'd look and wave. and then yell,
say,
how much cost? How much cost?
Not to say, oh, I'm sorry, but just like, hey, hi.
That's funny.
So just culturally different.
Wow. Yeah. I've only been run off the road. Let's see. Actually twice, but the most memorable one was in Tanzania, near Tanga, in the east. By what do they call those things? Not a picky pick. What's the little buses that it'll come back. Dolly.
Dolly, yeah.
You know what picky is, don't you?
A motorcycle, of course. Yeah.
Picky is Swahili for motorcycle.
What's
your favorite word?
It is. I love that. This is just absolutely spectacular. I'm reminded of the shot by 10 Years on Two Wheels.
Helge
Pedersen. His shot in the Amazon. Where are you here? And I know you had a slide on here. I didn't put it in, but you said this is not a boat. That's a tree with a hole in it.
Yes.
So basically, Lisa decided that we were going to go from Senegal into Mali, using Yeah, we didn't want to use the main roads, and there really was only one, because this is as we were starting our journey eastward through North Africa to get to the east coast.
So I wanted to actually go as far south as possible through the Casamance area of Senegal. And quite literally, we're right down at the south, running along the border with
Mali.
Well, no, it's Guinea. So you've got Senegal, and underneath you've got Guinea, and you're heading towards the border with Mali. And we're at the conjunction
this is the
there.
Falam River, or Falam River.
Falam River.
We had ridden at this point the toughest 2 days of our then very young motorcycle careers. It was literally what we hadn't appreciated. Bearing in mind, this is pre-Facebook. This is when we didn't have any internet available. We had maps. We had a few books. This was through an area that had taken us 2 days. The distances weren't big. It was just brutal riding, brush, scrub, animal tracks, no villages. Hundreds of miles of just boulder-strewn fields that we were bouncing over and falling off. When we finally got to the river, we were physically and mentally spent. It was also absurdly hot. Interestingly enough, we found out later this was the hottest in this area it had been for 200 years. The Dakar Rally stages were cancelled. Now, we didn't know that as young, naive travelers. We're like, well, it's Africa. I guess it's meant to be this hot. But this was meant to be a stream. That was the word that had been used. A stream.
Yeah, you'll come along to this stream. Yeah. And on one side, obviously it's Senegal. On the other side, which you're facing here in the photograph, is Mali. And we approached this river, raging river. It was moving very fast. It was very deep in the middle. And we just sat there and went, what are we going to do?
But this was actually kind of one of those. There haven't been many light bulb moments. Most of the changes in our personalities have happened very subtly over the course of the time. But this was poignant because, and again, I'm just going to talk from my own experience, my own memory, and then Lisa will give some input. I remember getting to the river, and we were approached by some locals because of the motorcycles. And we understood through hand gestures that there wasn't a bridge for 100 miles in any direction. The idea of going back the way we came was unthinkable because it had really beaten us up. We were absurdly dehydrated. And I looked at this and I went, okay, well, this is impossible. And these two brothers had approached us and he'd said, look, it's okay. This is obviously in French. With a heavy African accent. It's okay, I've got a boat. Needless to say, when I introduced my bike to the boat, we were less than filled with confidence. But there was just that singular moment when my brain chose, and it was a decision to switch itself from this is impossible to okay, this is possible. And this was one of the first examples when I realized that I had to put our complete and absolute faith in absolute and total strangers. So once the decision was made, again, it became quite pragmatic. The first thing we did was look at they are just trees with holes in the middle. And then, right, let's strip the bikes. So panniers, gear, fuel tanks, everything came off. All of that went across first over the course of about half a dozen trips. Then they came back, and at that point we had maybe 7 or 8 people from the villages around talking to us, and with their help we managed to get the bikes in. But initially their plan to transport my bike, which went first, was to stand up one either end and to hold my bike between their knees.
And you got to mind, there's no rudders on these.
No,
there's nothing.
So this thing could capsize in just a sneeze.
This thing has the stability of a frisbee, and so I actually got into the water and I pulled them back, and I made some small, screaming noises. I thought they were internal. Apparently they weren't. And we came up with this way of actually putting the bike over to the far side of the canoe and then leaning it against the pot engine. And then, no stability at all. Now, Lisa's was even scarier because without the cylinders, without the pot engines,
There was less to lean on.
her bike leant even further, which meant the guys now rowing,
Counterbalance.
and bearing in mind, they normally go back and forwards using their hands as paddles. So we ended up finding a piece of wood, finding an old plastic tub, cutting it up to make a paddle. And these two guys are almost leaning out of the boat to counterbalance Lisa's bike weight. The whole exercise was about 3.5 to 4 hours. It was 100 degrees in the shade. Nobody wanted any money. And on the other side, we ended up saying thank you with what ended up being a BMW key fob, a couple of US dollars. No idea why, because this was a long time before getting to the US, and a pack of condoms. Oh, and some cigarettes. And we don't smoke.
Wow. That's absolutely incredible. I can't believe, this is where you also learn that patience, because it's taken you hours to get patience
and trust. We were both control freaks. We still are to a larger or lesser degree.
Terribly.
But this was an important moment for both of us, but because there was no control here. We had absolutely zero control. Had the bikes gone in, 2.5, 3 years of prep, imagining, ambition, sacrifice would have come to a watery end right there, right then. The bikes would not have been salvageable.
Yeah.
And you did say this,
yep.
And I bring up this, you guys are in the UK. I put in one of my slides here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Totally agree with that.
But the sad thing is, for a lot of people that haven't traveled extensively, and I've got friends who I love, they'll look at that comment and go, oh, how cliche. But the wonderful thing about cliches is the truer they are, the more cliche they actually sound. And we regularly repeat, and I know you feel the same, that the world largely is a wonderfully friendly, welcoming, inviting place full of good people, friends you haven't met yet. But that's difficult for a lot of people to believe, because when you turn on the TV and the media, all you're seeing is bad things. For most people, ourselves included. Before we got to Africa, you were shown, when we were growing up, you were shown two sides of Africa. One was the Lion King, and one was famine. That was Africa. Yeah. And obviously, everywhere is so much more than that. But on the whole, people are helpful, generous. We've been on the receiving end of such absurd generosity and kindness, often from people who seemingly have nothing and yet are willing to share half of what they don't have without an expectation of return. And it really is, it's humbling.
Yeah, it does. And the thing I say in that day in and day again, so not only there are friends you haven't met, but the people that have so little are the ones who are willing to give so much.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's there. Let's go through. We got some more slides, and then we'll wrap. We got a few more because your photo, and then want to talk about your photo project as well. But let me get our little icons here, a little bit smaller and in a different spot.
That was heading south towards the Gobi Desert in Mongolia.
Yeah.
And this is a few slides we put together for a recent talk we give, because prior to leaving on the journey, I had a nice 7 Series BMW, and we had a nice lifestyle. I had a pack of, a whole slew of shirts, and Lisa had nice things, but we were not happy. And yet here we are, happier than we've ever been. We've got our tent, our 2 bikes, and we're grinning at each other with the camera in the background, because we're saying, we're heading towards the Gobi Desert. We're in Mongolia. We've not seen a living soul for 2 days. What an incredible experience.
But it's also important to take time out like this and not rush. Everybody's in, as I said before, too much of a rush with everything, and a lot of travelers too. And just take a step back and just appreciate where you are and how much effort you've put into it to get here. Why rush?
It's really important to give yourself the luxury of being in the moment. You can't do it all the time, because we've all got ambitions. We're all thinking ahead. But now and again, just to pause and be in the moment and go, wow, holy shit, this is cool. This is fantastic.
Not long ago, I knew somebody putting together kind of a course or an introduction to adventure travel. And one of the questions they posed to me was about we talked about GPS and finding those tracks, and I had a GPS at the very beginning of this thing, and usually it was more or less to let me have scale and to see a little of the topography, not for what we see GPS today as the drive-by, turn-by-turn directions. So what I did is I kind of played around with it, and I said, and it just relates to what you said, and it's funny how we come up with these things. And I said, well, a GPS really should just tell you what GPS stands for. GPS, good place to stop. And to have where you, like you say, to pause, right? So don't look at it as telling you where you're going, but maybe reminding you it's time to stop. So I love that. Good work. I love this photo. I know you've got so many of these great adventure with the motorcycle shots like we've been looking at. But the portraits that you're doing, and that you've been able to gain the confidence. This is where my passion is the people, like what we've been talking about. And I know this is those amazing eagle hunters. They train them in Kazakhstan and this is Mongolia, I guess.
Mongolia,
yeah. This is just on the outskirts of a small town called Algi, out towards the northwestern border with Russia.
And for those people who've never heard of these eagle hunters, tell us a little bit about what they do.
Basically, they are. So this is not a tourist thing. That's the first thing to point out. Mongolia is not known for its tourism. These guys take young golden eagles. They call them Burkett eagles, and they train them from a very young age. These are loved and respected animals, and they train them to hunt. But
also, it's a family business. So we know that his father had done it before him, and since this gentleman here has been on one of the adventure programs.
He's been on numerous TV shows after we met him,
and he's actually been training his daughter, which is one of the first female eagle hunters to be trained in the family business, really. And so they go out. They're on their horses. This is their normal attire. They're not dressed up. You didn't dress up specially for us or for as tourism.
Not for central casting, yeah.
No. There he is. He's just like this, and and they've got the eagles on their arms as they're riding, and you think, have I returned to the era of Genghis Khan? When you see them coming towards you over the landscape, it is incredible. And we feel so lucky to be able to experience this.
It's a dream of mine, that to see this. And I mean, these birds, I mean, they target a. I should actually really quickly show you this. This is not an eagle. This is just a funny thing. How you say eagle eye or hawk eye.
Yeah.
Just check this thing out for a second. A little treat. You know what? Talk about a gimbal.
My goodness.
They fly so fast, but their heads stay so focused.
I love it.
That is wrong, but wonderful.
I do love it. I like it.
Oh man, it's crazy. It's crazy. So anyway, new perspective there. Let's move on. We kind of saw this shot in the Amazon section, but I love the fact that what happened to the other bridge.
Exactly. That was like the bridge we were trying to cross when Simon had his accident.
Yeah.
This pontoon was put there because there was a village that they were going to try and reinstate about 20 miles further down. And there were a couple of small villages around, and they'd basically gone down there with some vehicles and put this pontoon in because at the time the government was basically reevaluating whether the road could be reopened, bearing in mind it had been closed for 25 years, and they were putting up transmitters. And so initially, the first I don't know, probably the first 2 or 3 hours, we'd heard all these incredible stories of the BR319, and we had ropes and pulleys and fuel and blah,
we're
blah,
like,
blah.
oh, it's not so bad.
This is okay, it's challenging, but this is doable. Yeah, those were famous last words. If you have a look at Lisa's bike, so Lisa has 39 liters, so almost 10 gallons of fuel. And then she has 2 extra canisters on top of her panniers. So we have 51 liters of water, which is a lot. And on top of that, we then have another 25 liters of fuel on top of the 10 gallons we're already carrying.
Yeah.
Those bikes were heavy.
But
Yeah,
And we still ran out of fuel.
They're going to get lighter as time goes on. So, you know.
Yeah. Another one of those great epic scale shots. Where are we?
This was anyone that's heard us talk about this photograph has heard this story before, because again, luck or divine intervention. This is Tajikistan. This is coming over one of the famous passes that we had wanted to get to and photograph. Normally our photography is very reactive, but this was a pass that I knew was special. The night before, low minus 20 numbers, absolutely bitter cold. We got to the top. I'm yelling at Lisa, stop, 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 because our comms aren't working. She has altitude sickness, but I really want to get this photograph. And I have this big shoot planned in my head, and the background of the mountains and the earth and the snow. Well, I managed to stop. I managed to get her to pause. It turns out that the temperature had dropped so low the night before. Every single battery of every single recording device is totally dead. So I put my bike on side stand. I ran the engine. I took all the batteries out, and I simply laid them on the cylinder head, hoping they wouldn't explode, melt, or crack. One of them did. I managed to get enough heat into one battery, and I have 7, to get 3 photographs. And we've spent 6 months trying to get here, and that was one of the photographs. But this photograph worked out pretty well. I love the photograph because just photographically, I love the fact that when I look at it, I go, shit, I'm really proud. That's my wife. That's cool. And it's been on the front of a few books, a few magazines. Yeah, it's done the rounds, but I love it.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorites.
It's definitely very cool. This is one of my favorites of your portrait series, and I love it because I love the texture, but and the obviously the composition is really good, the expression is good, and then you have the fingers just grabbing 3 of them with the pinky hanging out on that Coke can. And it's almost like a duotone or a tritone. The way that you obviously edited this to a degree to really give it that texture. It's so much. Where is he? And did you try the Coke?
Well, this is in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, the capital city, and it just literally a street urchin. And I don't think we were going out to take photographs of people that day. We were kind of intent on going to see.
That was our first day in Phnom Penh. We were basically going out to get some food and some groceries and some bits and pieces. We were restocking
just to
the bikes.
Go out and have a look exactly where we were in the city.
And he was with his father. But the reason I took the photograph wasn't the Coke or anything else. It was just that I'd noticed him looking around, and obviously he's a very young boy. But just to look at him, his skin, and he has this incredibly mature, experienced stare that's so much older than his actual years, and you find this so often. He wasn't living on the streets, as far as I know, because I had a chat to his father afterwards, and I went over and I showed them the photograph, and and suddenly he just became a little boy. He went from being this kid who was staring kind of very scornfully, and I showed them both the photograph, and his eyes lit up, and suddenly he became a little boy again. But yeah, I think I've got 3 photographs of him. This was my favorite.
Yeah, it's really cool. And
It was kind of this was a funny one because we were trying to stop him from smiling. We kept on going, no, be serious.
We were riding west to east through Pakistan, and what we didn't know at the time was that this was at the very height of the hunt for bin Laden. So we had traveled through Iran. We'd been monitored by the secret police the entire time. They'd given us an escort to the border. That wasn't a choice with the Iranians and the military. And then we arrived at the Pakistan border, and we'd heard about it, but we ended up going, well, that can't possibly happen. We have no connection with the Pakistani government. We had a forced but free full military escort the entire way through Pakistan. Now, again, we didn't know it at the time, but this was at the height of the hunt for bin Laden. We ended up coming in from the west, and the first major city was Quetta. Now, Quetta at that time was a stronghold for Al Qaeda. There were 3 known Al Qaeda generals who were living there. And that was apparent because when we were trying to find accommodation with our military escort, so 4 guys in a Land Rover at the front, 4 guys in the back, all with Kalashnikovs. We couldn't find anywhere to stay. Nobody would actually be willing to take on a foreigner. But this guy was a checkpoint guard. He just looked fantastic, but just could not get him to stop smiling for the camera. Yeah. This was the only one where he wasn't just grinning like he'd won the lottery.
Wow. Of course, I know where this is. This is the Altiplano. This is between the Salar de Uyuni and San Pedro de Atacama, the classic Lagunas route.
Yes, this is a Laguna Hedionda. And as you can see, we're pretty laden up. We wouldn't normally be carrying that much stuff, but of course, as you know, you're at high altitude and you're in the middle of nowhere.
This is 16,500 feet.
You have to make sure you've got at least a spare tire there because you can't afford to get stuck. And this was very early in the morning time, and we pulled on up, and I'm peering into the distance, and I'm like, "What are they? What are those pink blobs? What are they doing here?"
This is 20 past 6 in the morning.
I just didn't know that flamingos would be at that altitude. It really amazed me.
And we'd had a marital meltdown because I saw the write up. Like loving relationship for 24/7. Not strictly true. So we'd been freezing our asses off the night before. We had a long way to go to reach the Salar de Uyuni. This was a fantastic shot, and I didn't want to take it. I was absolutely freezing cold. We hadn't had any coffee. It was 20 past 6 in the morning, and Lisa was adamant that we needed to get this shot. So because it wasn't my choice, I'm being all childish and I'm playing my face and I'm being huffy about it. We had our very first digital SLR camera. I had no idea what to do with it, but I knew it had a 10-second delay. Now, bearing in mind that we are wearing every item of clothing we have to the point where we can barely move and the circulation's being cut off to our extremities.
The Michelin Man.
That was exactly it. I'd set the camera up, I'd press the button, and 19 times I did not make it back to sit on my bike. It's just Lisa looking cool and my leg and my ass at some kind of weird position. This was attempt 20. And this is the only shot that worked out. Now I've got an orange sign saying we've got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, there's a 2-hour limit on our thing, so it's amazing that we've had this much time and let's do it. So we will wrap this up. We'll go to this is the last photo in this slideshow, and if I were to guess, I think this is Indonesia somewhere, but it's obviously in the Ring of Fire, but I love this.
It's Mount Bromo. We're in the national park there, which I can't pronounce the full name. But we're in the southeast section of the island of Java. And it looks surreal because it really is like that in real life.
This is sunrise. We got up at 3:30 in the morning. And just to be clear, you see in the very bottom right-hand corner, you've got some shrubs, some bushes.
So in the
you see in the very bottom lower right,
yeah,
you have that edge. Okay. You think what you're looking at is volcanoes, and by all intents and purposes, they are. They're actually calderas. Now, a caldera is basically a risen piece of earth. The actual volcano, it's a super volcano. Now, a super volcano, just for those who don't know, is one of those ones that if it erupts, it changes life on the planet. So the volcano edge itself is in the bottom right, and if you look over in the left-hand side, you'll see the edge of a mountain. It's not. That's the other edge of the crater, and it goes all the way outside. This is roughly the same size as Yellowstone in terms of the national park size.
Wow.
Inside, those are cones that have been pushed up from underneath the volcano surface, but they're just vast. This actually isn't one shot. This is 12 separate shots that are taken vertically and then stitched together. It's something like a 48.
Yeah, you could print this
megabyte.
Yeah,
No, it's
absolutely massive.
This is 168 megabyte photograph. It's huge. It'll print vast, but there's so much detail, and it's sunrise. Those are the colors.
As a younger, and it was before my journey, and I had but I'd rented motorcycles in all the Indonesian. Well, I did like 8 of the Indonesian islands, so I had rented one in each of those places. But while we're getting ready to be pushed out here, I'm putting up in the offer thing that you guys have these photo galleries. If those of you are watching on the YouTube, don't worry, the links will be in the description below. But this is some spectacular photography. If you like what you've seen, click that link right now before we get tossed out of this room, and bookmark that, and go check out some of the incredibly amazing photos that these two have taken, and
they're all for sale. You can print them as postcards. You could print them as gigantic prints for a wall.
Less than a minute.
So yeah, or just go and click and enjoy them. But there's some great photographs.
So do that, and we had the link up. I'm going to play a very short video, and then we'll say goodbye at the back end of this. Yeah, this is just my little closing.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning in to the Journeys Webcast. I'm Allan Karl, your host. Be sure to tune us in every Monday. The time changes depending on where we are in the world. This is Allan Karl, and where will your next journey take you? Hey guys, I wish we had more time, but thank you. Oh, this has been fantastic.
It's our pleasure.
You know what?
It's been lovely.
Let's do a part 2. Can we do a part 2?